And will there be video, or is it only audio?
It's both video and audio.
Good to know. Make sure I don't make any weird faces.
You're good. You are good. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Got a review. Let me get our anchor up. We are live now on YouTube with Todd Cunningham, former player. Welcome. I'm glad to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. Anytime. New episode. Let's get this going. And we are underway. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 26 of Coffee Time. We are going to have a new special time now. We are transitioning. The show is no longer will be called Dave at the end. He decided to quit. So starting Thursday, we'll have a new guest. We'll have a new co-host. But for tonight, I'm going alone. And we have former MLB player Todd Cunningham. Welcome to the show. I hope you and your family are staying safe. As always, you get your vaccinations yet?
Yeah, we're underway, man.
That's awesome and good to hear. So let's get right to it. First, I want to get into your career. Obviously, you played for, I believe it was the Angels and the Braves, correct?
Yeah, that was my big league time. I became a bit of a journeyman, so I had some other teams on the resume at the minor league level.
And would you say when you were called up till the end of your career, what pitchers? Two-part question: what pitchers gave you the most fits, and what pitchers did you hit well?
Well, if you're looking at big league stats, you can make the argument that most pitchers gave me fits. But the one that stands out probably the most is had trouble with was a guy named Will Startup. Not a name that most people would recognize, but through 83 to 85 lefty, had a really funky leg kick, and the ball just kind of popped out of nowhere at you. So I always remember not enjoying facing him just because you couldn't pick it up.
And a good one.
Yeah, the second part, honestly, no one jumps to mind as someone I just absolutely owned. I feel like it was more like teams that I played well against. Like the Marlins, I always feel like I did well against at the big league. So, I can't really think of a specific pitcher yet. Not a satisfying answer, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, you're fine. But yeah, like you said, yeah, I did see your stats. You had a career, I think, was 208. But honestly, does that really matter to you? I mean, you made it to unlike what other people can say. You actually made it big time. I mean, is that how you see it instead of the stats-wise on how well you performed? I'm sure you wish you could have done better, but hey, you made it there unlike what anybody else says they can do, what very few say they can do.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to boil down a whole career into one stat line of batting average without considering some of the context and some of the achievements around that. So, coming from a small town, really no expectations of making it to the big leagues, it was an awesome ride. And once I was at the big league level, much of it was coming off the bench where you're facing back in bullpen guys throwing 98 with sink and splitter, so good luck, right? So
yeah.
I had a blast, so I definitely am not discounting it from one stat line.
Now, transitioning to what the game is today, if you were still playing to this day, do you think you could transition to what it is today of swing and miss, walks, strikeout? Do you think you could handle that better than what you could when you played? Do you think you would have had a better stat line?
No, I think that's a really interesting point, right? Like when I was drafted in 2010 by the Braves, small ball was still very much valued. They respected guys that could bunt, they could hit and run, they could steal the bag. And about halfway through my career is when the analytics came heavy into the game, front office evaluations, and all of a sudden you had to try to be a different type of player. So kind of to your point, like I think that's kind of what helped me transition out of the game, right? Was that the game just changed on me, and I just I probably didn't change or adopt some of the new metrics that were being used to evaluate players fast enough. So I could go back and do it again, trying to hit more homers and taking the walks and not being scared of a punch out. Like, that probably would have been, a longer career for me. But when I was drafted, that's not what was valued. So it was hard to make that transition for me.
Now, do you think that's honestly hurting the game with how much analytics is used to this day, or do you think it's actually helping the game?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a place for analytics. I don't see analytics ever leaving the game entirely. That's just a personal opinion, but I do see it as like a pendulum, right? Like right now it's swinging really hard towards analytics, and it's probably at some point in the future going to come back to a more moderate style of play. But there's just so much more data, just like the rest of the world, with the technology of TrackMan coming into it and all the information you can pull from that. And there's computing power where organizations have teams of computer scientists that are just crunching numbers and trying to find that competitive advantage. So I think that's always going to be a component of it for sure.
Now, I believe the shift was when you started when you first called up, and that was started by Joe Madden of the Rays. Go figure. He's the one that basically starts everything, of course. Did you hate that when you were playing? I don't know if you had the shift on you or whatnot because of your stats or whatnot, but I know you witnessed it. Did you personally like it or hate the shift?
So it depends if you're asking the offensive player, Todd Cunningham, or the defensive player, Todd Cunningham, right?
Two-part question. There you go. Let's go with both. Yeah, two-part question there.
So offensively, obviously, it sucks, right? Like, you step in the box, you're the kind of hitter that you are, you look up into the field, and they have you played really weird, so you think you end up putting in a play and you're hitting it right at somebody. You hate, as a competitor, you hate being figured out, right? You like thinking that you have the advantage, and because of all the stats and the analytics behind it, they have a pretty good idea of where you tend to hit the ball. So offensively, it sucks. But on the defensive side, I considered myself probably a defensive first player at the big league level. That's kind of what made my career there, right? Like that got me a little bit of extra time because I was able to understand some of the hitter tendencies and position well and give myself a chance. And pitchers tend to like that, right? A guy smokes one that pitcher thinks is in the gap, and you're kind of camped out there because you read the scouting report. So, it depends on what side of the ball you're on.
So now I gotta ask, with the fans slowly coming back into play and full stadiums slowly coming back into play, you as a player when you played, obviously we didn't go through this when you played, but what would you feel, or how would you have feel playing to this day, like last year when players had no audience at all and it was all like driven like by I don't know what they use, electronics or whatever, I don't know, but you as a player when you were playing, put yourself through a player to this day when they played last year. Does that hurt as a player, knowing that there's no fans in the stands?
I mean, absolutely. Like, that's, as much as guys like to tout that they're a true competitor at heart, and it's just them against the pitcher, you have to bring into account that the fans and that buzz of the crowd, stadium, and especially intense moments when it starts to get loud, like that definitely helps fuel you on the field as an athlete. It would definitely be a different experience playing with no fans. And I think probably the harder part from guys that I've spoken with that went through it last year that are still playing is the effects that it has on their family, right? All of a sudden they can't travel with them, or they have to make the decision of, do they isolate and be just with their family, or do they take the season they can be with friends and kind of more auxiliary family. So I think that is probably the harder component. On the field, obviously you can get that little extra boost from having fans in the seats, but I think the isolation on behind the scenes is probably harder on performance than specifically during game time.
Now, I gotta say this. I think I'm kind of iffy half and half on this. I don't know if you are as well. But I know they're trying to implement more playoff teams to stop the word quote unquote tanking. And they started that last year. Do you like that concept of two extra teams in the playoffs? Or do you like the old system better?
Yeah, so you're coming out with some hot questions right now, right out of the gate. Yeah, I mean, as a fan of baseball, like I'm not a player anymore. Like I love seeing more teams in the playoffs. I think it's exciting. Like postseason baseball is probably my favorite time of year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like that aspect. And if you look on the business side, it probably makes it a more interesting dynamic where all of a sudden there are more teams that are in the hunt, and obviously revenue dollars are made in playoffs where you're bigger TV contracts. So like if you got a shot to make playoffs, you want to make it. So you're right. Like it incentivizes maybe some different levels of competitive nature from the front office side. I never saw any teams trying to tank, as you put it. But I could see why would you want to just miss playoffs if you could get a better draft pick by finishing a couple slots down. So I definitely understand that there are some incentives in both ways, but just purely as a fan, I love additional teams making playoffs.
And that's what I'm half and half. I mean, I agree too. I like it as a fan. But also, I grew up in the old days with just like you did. That's why you played the game. You loved it too. So I mean, you know how the old playoffs was. So that's why I'm half and half. I mean, yeah, I like to see more teams. It makes better competition. But yeah, I mean, I'm still half and half. But hey, I think it's going to go well. I mean, like you said, it's more drama. Comes down to that.
And I think it's good for the sport too, right? Like if you look at just viewership numbers, baseball has been fading slowly over the past couple of years. Like even people like my now wife, when we were dating while I was still playing, like she could have taken a leave in baseball because just games are so long and it can be slow action sometimes. So I think any way that they can kind of spice it up and bring more fans to the table, I think it's going to be good for the sport as a whole.
Now, another two-part question. Any favorite stories you had in your playing career off and on the field?
I mean, on the field would probably be my first big league hit. It's kind of hard to top that. Off the field, favorite memory during the baseball season. That's kind of the question.
Yes.
That's a tough one. I mean, that same year of getting called up for the first time and having to do like the walk of shame with all the other rookies through New York City dressed in a Speedo, like, I don't know if that would be like a good memory or a bad memory, but it's one of the more vivid memories, right? So, yeah, so off the field, like that was just the first one that comes to mind.
I couldn't imagine doing that. What was it? The veterans that set that up for you guys to wear Speedos? What the heck was that all about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's this may be taboo to say this word now, but it was rookie hazing, to where you kind of had to earn your spot on the team, and you have the traditional like singing on the bus on the way to the airport after games, where each rookie has to get up there and sing a karaoke song. There's just different things, but one of the events, if you will, during that September call-up period for all the rookies was they dropped us all off in matching uniforms. It was tank tops, some like wing floaties, a shower cap with like flowers on it, and like a Speedo. And they dropped us off like 4 blocks from the hotel in New York City, and the bus followed us slowly. And the nice thing about it being in New York City is we kind of fit right in, right? Like we didn't get too many weird looks because it's New York. Like you see all kinds of stuff. Whereas if you've been dropped off in a smaller market team, it may have caused a little more of a ruckus. But yeah, it was, like I said, definitely one of the more vivid memories of my playing career.
So who did you learn from the most in your playing career? Who you were on some teams with, I think Chipper or did he retire before you were called up?
Yeah, he was probably 2 years retired by the time I made my debut, but I was around him in like big league camp for short stints. But I would say the two guys that come to mind from my early playing days is Matt Diaz. He's with the Braves. He's
Yep, I remember him. Yeah,
been around for a while. Good bat off the bench. Absolutely raked against lefties. But he kind of took me under his wing early, and just a really good guy. It wasn't as much technical stuff on the field as it was just how to be a big leaguer, how to handle some of the stressors that come along, and how to just enjoy the ride, because you never know how long it's going to be. And then more from like on the field, how to get ready for a pinch hit at bat, how to think through when that pitcher might come out of the game for the pinch hit, how to think through what outfielders might be defensive replacement for. Reed Johnson was that guy. He I haven't fact checked this, but I heard that he played 11 or 12 years in the big leagues, never had a multi-year deal. So every year he played for his next contract.
Yeah, because I think when you got called up, he was finishing his career out with you guys, the Braves. Because he was, I remember him. I remember when he was first called up, he was with the Blue Jays. He spent most of his career with the Blue Jays.
Yeah, and he was such a solid dude, right? Like I said, he would walk you through all of the very nuanced details of how to prepare for a big league environment as far as like your role on the team. And that's something that doesn't matter, how many years you get in the minor leagues or what sort of farm system you come up in. It's really hard to prepare for that without having guys that have been through it.
What about Mike Scioscia? What did you learn from him as manager? I know you played with him. He was a Hall of Famer. I know that in his own right.
Yeah, Scioscia he was a great manager. He spent a long time with the Angels, and I was fortunate enough to play while he was still there. And the thing that I really appreciated about him was that he was so honest and straightforward, right? Like, the one thing that you want as a player is you want to know what's expected of you, and you want to know where you stand. And when guys start BSing you can typically sniff it out. And so he wasn't about that. He let you know straight up, this is what we expect of you now that you're on this team, and if things aren't going so well, this is what we need for you to do to help us as a club. And I think with that type of leadership, guys really knew where they stood on that ball.
Now, I don't know if your LinkedIn is correct, but it is say you were a coach.
Yeah, so it's always an interesting transition when you go from playing to whatever comes after. And I spent a year coaching with the Angels in their minor league system, trying to really figure out where I was going to fit into my post-playing life. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I was applying to grad schools. I was feeling out what it would look like to stay in the game, what it would be like to stay with Angels specifically, and then what roles might make sense. And ultimately ended up leaving to go back to grad school, which I just graduated Saturday.
Oh, so, congratulations.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I was happy to go through that. But I spent that year coaching their high-end club, and actually really loved it. I think the hardest part was it's on the other side of the country from where my family is, which is tough. That's kind of what comes with that territory.
So if you ever were offered back to go to coaching, would you take it, or would you take an announcing job?
I think if the situation was right. Like, different stages of your life, you have different priorities, right? And so, like, when I was younger, I was all about moving all over the world. Bounced around to a bunch of different teams, played in the Dominican, played in Mexico one year, like, had a blast. And then meet a lady, want to settle down and start a little family, and priorities change, right? So bouncing all over the world is a little harder. And so I think as long as the situation was right and the opportunity was right to be able to be a dad and a husband as well, then I think that would, I would love to do it, right? Like, that's kind of what everyone dreams of doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I live it. I mean, I found the girl, the woman of my dreams, and we got married, have 2 kids. So I mean, I'm proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
It's an awesome experience. So you're right on that. You can't beat that, correct?
Absolutely.
But yeah, so now I kind of want to ask you to, growing up, because I know there's not much age difference between us. So we were both 90s boys, and watching the so-called steroid era. Do you believe that honestly it hurt or helped the game?
The steroids came into the game?
No, the steroid era. Do you think that hurt or helped the game?
Man, that is a double-edged sword, right? Like, you have your baseball purists that, get really upset that anybody would disrespect the game in that way, but also it was kind of exciting, right? Like, all the homers kind of rejuvenated the game and brought some more fans into it with some of the home run chases and whatnot. So, if you're looking at like a macro level, like big picture, there's probably an argument to be made that it helped the game. But if you look at what baseball has always been to America specifically, America's pastime, it's not the way it was intended to be played, and that's hard to swallow and hard to tip your cap and appreciate an era where guys are cheating. So that's a tough one, man. I think there's an argument both ways.
Did you think when you were watching it, like I was, that there was indeed juicing going on?
If I can be really honest, I probably didn't care because I thought it was just awesome to watch all the homers, right? Like, I was born in '89, so, there towards the end of the '90s when McGuire and Sosa are having the slugfest and trying to set the record, I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, and I just wanted to see some homers get hit. And so, like, probably not the purest answer of, like, the baseball spirit, but it was exciting, right?
It was, yeah, it was. I'm not going to deny that. So do you think those guys should ultimately be in a Hall of Fame or no?
Fortunately, I'm not the one that has to make that decision because that's a hard call, right?
It is.
Yeah, and so, I don't envy the person that has to say yes or no to allowing them in, but I do know that no matter what you're on, to be able to hit some of those pitches that they were hitting is still impressive. Like, they were still all really good players. So yeah, it's a tough one, man. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision.
I know, right? Same. What do you remember most about your debut, and where, and what were you thinking when you first got the call that you were being called up to the majors?
Yeah, this is probably the question I get asked the most, right, about my time playing is what was it like that first game? And so I'm sorry if you've already heard a very common story like this, but I'm going to tell you my story.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we were in AAA playing the Charlotte Knights, and we had an off day the next day. And we had all kind of piled up at my teammate's lake house, his family there, near Gwinnett. And so we were hanging out there. We were down on the dock, just being guys, just hanging out with an off day tomorrow, and get a call about midnight that night from a number I don't know, and answer it, and it's my manager at the time, and he's telling me, he's just kind of asking, like, so what are you doing? I was like, just kind of hanging out, like, what are you doing? It's midnight. He's like, well, I just wanted to call and let you know that you need to report to the stadium tomorrow about 1:30, 2 o'clock. It's still, we got an off day tomorrow, like, I don't, maybe you just woke up and you're still, like, sleep talking, I don't know, but it's like, no, you need to be at Turner Field, not over at Gwinnett. And so obviously the head starts spinning. I'm with a group of guys already, and we're kind of celebrating down there on the dock, and call my parents, wake them up and tell them. And then I realized, like, I should probably go to bed. Right? I got a big day tomorrow. So I try to get a few hours of sleep, and we're an hour or so outside of Gwinnett Lake House. And the next day I get up early. I'm trying to get in touch with the clubby to get in and get my stuff and pack up, get over to the stadium, and I'm not supposed to be there till like 1:32. I'm there like 11:30, like way too early. And so I'm the first one there. I'm getting fitted for my uniform, just kind of soaking it all in. And I can remember like coordinating with my parents of who was going to be there, who wasn't. And so my mom was coming over from some other people from the college that I went to, and my dad unfortunately had to be with my brother while he was doing some stuff for college soccer. And so the game goes on. It's about the 5th inning, I believe. We're playing the Rockies. There's a lefty that comes in to pitch, Jeff Francis, and I get the pinch hit knock. And so I'm all pumped up. I walk out there, and I'm all nervous. I'm trying to have my game plan. Don't really remember anything about it except he threw me a lot of off-speed pitches, and out front, hit a little weak line drive into left field for a base hit in my first big league at bat. So I'm stoked, but I'm trying to like play the role, right? So I'm trying to act all serious and tough, and I'm just trying to hold back a smile. Is really all that it comes down to.
Now,
Jason Hayward.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. Finish that.
Jason Hayward's behind me. He gets a hit. So now it's man on first and second. They do a pitch and change. And I'm just standing on second and just kind of like looking up and seeing how big Turner Field is and just appreciating the noise. And then I hear, Jason kind of trying to get my attention. He used to do this like he would cut the noise. I don't know. So he gets my attention and he's like, come over here. And he like gives me a big hug. And he's huge, right? He's like 6'5". I'm a very normally built individual. So like he just swallows me. He tells me to tip my cap. So I give, the fans a nod. Come to find out, during all of this going on in the game, the camera zoomed in on my mom and she's like, look, this is Todd's mom. Look how proud she is. And the person she had come with was our radio announcer from my college.
Oh, there
and
you
so
go.
They were calling him my dad. And so it's still an ongoing joke that his name's Mike Harris at JSU, where I went to school. And he still calls me a son just because he got caught up in the camera panning the stands because he was sitting next to my mom after my big hit. So it's a fun story that we still get to laugh about now, but it was obviously an incredible day.
Now, your last game in the majors, did you have a funny feeling in your heart? Did you know it was over in the majors?
No, right? Like I think that's kind of the mystique about getting that shot in the big leagues is you don't know how long it's going to last. And so we were playing San Francisco, the Giants, and they needed to make a roster move to bring up another arm, and I was the extra guy, and it just kind of happened. And so at that point, my thought was like, all right, I'm just going to have to earn my way back up. And so, spend the next 2 or 3 seasons trying to get back to the big leagues. And so very rarely do I think guys know that they'll never get back. And I think that's part of what makes an athlete competitive is whether they're totally off base or not, they always think they've got a shot, right? So like no matter how bad of a season I've had, if I get hot right now, I could get back to the big leagues, right? You always have to have that little bit of hope. And so, yeah, I definitely did not know that last game that I played with the Angels that I would never be back to the big leagues.
Now, your time with the Braves, you said you spent with Reed Johnson, Dan Ugla, like you said, Matt Diaz, I think was his name, right? Because I remember that.
He wasn't there during that part. He was around for a lot of the big league camps that I was a part of. But yeah, I mean, they had a stacked outfield. They had both Upton brothers, and Hayward, and Reed Johnson. And it's just like tough to crack that lineup. Just like the young kid coming through the system.
Who would you say the leaders in the locker room were for that squad when you played? Who took the charge?
Yeah, I mean, Freddie Freeman was on that team as well. Pretty good hitter. So naturally, he's going to be a leader on the team. One of the more impressive guys was Ugla. He struggled a lot with Atlanta at that point in his career, and he was still super respected by everyone else on the team because he showed up to the field ready to play every day. And I think that made him, a bit of a leadership position. And then, in the outfield, you got some pretty good players with Jay Hay and Jay Up, and then his brother. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of guys that contributed to the personality of that team, but I would say Freeman and Ugla and Hayward were probably like the 3 that I remember the most of just feeling like they ran the clubhouse, right? As a young rookie, I don't have a whole lot of insight, and I'm probably missing a ton of guys that deserve a shout out, but those are kind of the ones that jumped to mind.
Now, do you remember your first hit and who it was off and who you were facing?
Yeah, so that was my debut. Jeff Francis was the lefty with the Rockies. Hit a changeup into left field, kind of out front, one hand, and just slipped through the infield.
Did you have the whole team gang up on you when you came back to the dugout?
Yeah, they did the old give you the fake ball, act like they throw it in the stands. They did that whole thing, and Reed Johnson actually wrote on it, first major league hit, and misspelled every word on there. Gave it to me like, oh, this is your actual ball. It was a joke, obviously. So, yeah, they had a good time with with putting the rookie in his place, right? And I think that's part of the beauty of being on a team like that, is to be able to go through those moments.
Now, did you have a favorite place you played at when you played for both the Braves and the Angels? Because I know it's NL, AL, so did you have a favorite place you played for, and what fan base gave you the most fits that you did not like?
Yeah, so when I was with Atlanta, I was up and down a ton because Gwinnett and Atlanta are so close. So I feel like every time I was called up with Atlanta, we played either the Mets or the Marlins. I feel like we went to New York to play the Mets every other week when I was up there. And that's a fun place to play, right? Like, you're in New York City, all the hustle and bustle, so much to see. So that was fun. As far as like the actual stadium and stuff, playing out against the Giants, this is back when they had been on a pretty good run and had won some World Series. And I remember it was a Tuesday night, and the place was packed. Why are there so many people on a random Tuesday? That's just how they operated there. The fans were just diehard. And I played left field that night against Tim Hudson, just pounding sinkers all night, and everyone in the stands out in left field where I was playing was chanting at me the whole game. What's the matter with Cunningham? He's a bum. Nonstop for like 8 innings. So it was a long night.
I bet. Do you still talk to any of the players you played with today, or do you talk to any current players?
Yeah, the guys that all came through the same draft, that 2010 draft with the Braves. There's a few of us that still keep in touch, and it's pretty cool to be a part of that little family, right? Like, kind of went through very similar life experiences that are very unique, that most people aren't going to get a chance to go through them all together. So we went through a lot of the minor league steps, as well as a lot of our big league debuts before everyone gets traded, assigned to different clubs and whatnot. So, but we're able to still keep in touch, which is great.
So now, I don't know if I'm sure you do, like I do. Let's go with current baseball and 2 of your former teams. I gotta ask you, first and foremost, about the Braves. What do you think the Braves need to do this year to win the World Series? What do they need to get?
Yeah, you're asking some tough questions because, like I said, I've been in a graduate program, living under a rock, studying 24/7. So I probably haven't kept up with it as much as I should have. I just know that they have a lot of really good young players, and I saw that Acuna's been hurt. So, I mean, they need to get their guys back on the field, right? And I think he's finally coming back and starting to play. But when you got young talent like that, like, get out of their way, right? Just let them go. So keep them healthy. Keep them, motivated and engaged with the game. And, good things I think are going to happen for them.
And what about the Angels? Because they just released Pujols, and now he's on the Dodgers.
Yeah, they just released Pujols. I saw that Trout got hurt, and he's going to miss 6 to 8
weeks. Yep.
Same thing, right? Like, you need your guys on the field.
What about pitching-wise? Because they've never been good at pitching, and they blame it all on Pujols in that contract.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, right? Like, obviously, I don't know what the contract details look like, if Angels are having to eat any of those contract dollars, but you got to think that that'll free up some spending, free up some budget to be able to go out and get some arms to really compete. Because when you have arguably the best player in the big leagues with Mike Trout, like, you should have a shot to win. You should, especially giving him the big contract like that, they intend to be competitive, and so go out and get those missing pieces. And so hopefully they'll have some dollars to be able to spend to do that. Who else released?
Now, as we talked about earlier, we briefly got into it about the game. What do you think baseball has to do more to market their better players? Because right now, it's only the players that are on the main teams, like the bigger cities like New York, Philly, LA, Texas. You know that. So what can they do to market better their players and their teams that are struggling?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If I answer that, I could probably make a lot of money selling that idea. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to remember that baseball is a business, right? And so, like, teams that are big market teams that have more audience viewership share, that obviously you're going to promote those because that's what the fans are into. Which is unfortunate because it creates some dichotomy. It creates the have and the have-nots with the big market teams and the small market teams, and it's really hard to break through doing that. So yeah, I mean, I think it depends on just your perspective on life and how much you think there should be some larger authority kind of governing some of the smaller players, or whether you think that it's all going to work itself out with perfect competition. So I think you're right. It's definitely something that happens, and it's definitely something that makes baseball interesting to follow because there are some incentives to promote bigger market teams because they have bigger viewerships. But that definitely hurts some of the smaller market players, which I think is where it gets really interesting if you're like really into the weeds as a baseball fan, because you look at someone like the Rays, who's a smaller market team, and they're able to really put together a team that's World Series caliber without such a huge budget. And so how teams can leverage a lot of the analytics in the game to find some of those undervalued players to be able to build out that team. And then so as more teams are able to do that, as you're adding more teams to the playoffs and getting that exposure, you're hopefully playing field will be even a little bit as some of the viewership and the dollars spent in baseball get spread around. But yeah, I mean, I wish I had a great answer for you. Right?
No, you answered as best as you could. I mean, that's honestly kind of what my answer would be as well. I mean, I just don't know if there's a good way or not, but still gotta be asked because it's still a part of. I mean, it just sucks that there's a lot of good talent out there, and the only thing that's being marketed is the big teams. That's it. I mean, it just sucks.
And I think like time zones play a big part of it too, right? Like you get out to the West Coast, those 7:00 starting games are late for people.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's hard to accumulate some of those viewerships. And you look at just media and what it is right now. Anyways, with some of the streaming services, and it's also broken up and blackouts in certain areas of the country because of TV deal and ownership rights. It gets really complicated to build just like a total country of baseball loving audience because everything is so pocketed and targeted, and that's how a lot of the social media advertising operates now. So I'm not sure how to tackle that.
Right. Now, when you got on base or when you played in the outfield, did you have any great conversations with any other players on the field? And take us through some of those conversations. Were they appropriate for podcasts?
I think that's probably the better question, right, Brian or Byron? So, yeah, I mean, I think my first big league hit, Todd Helton was on first base, Hall of Famer. Like, that's a pretty cool conversation with him saying, "Hey, it's a really good job up there. Congratulations. I'm sure there'll be a lot more." Like that conversation means something. And so, there's some little things like that kind of stand out. But yeah, I would say the majority of conversations that happen on a baseball field are just nonsensical or totally inappropriate, right? Like guys are just out there having a good time. And, with that, it's a long season. You got to find a way to make it fun. And some of that, it just probably isn't worth sharing the story.
Yeah, did you have that? Did you do a lot of the talking too?
Oh, in the heat of the game, I probably didn't talk that much, but I mean, I definitely did some ridiculous stuff. Especially when I was in AAA with the Angels, we had just a fun team, and I remember on the road up in Washington, I got a little air horn, and I'd hide in every stadium we went to as guys would walk to the batting cages, and I would scare everybody as they went to go get ready. So yeah, I mean, like just stupid stuff like that, right? Where you're just kind of, it's a long rolling season. You got to find a way to make it fun.
Yeah, you're right about that. 162 games. I mean, damn, I couldn't imagine playing that many. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's just. I go back and look at it and like just how as we were talking about earlier with the game evolving, we'll go back on that a little bit. It's just, to me, I'm still going to watch the game because I like baseball, just like you do. But to me, a part of me just wants to tune it out because it's not the same like when I was growing up. I liked the move the runner over, the stealing. You don't even see that anymore. It's like, you get what I'm saying? It's tough. It's tough as a fan. Bro,
I do understand, because with small ball, there's so much more strategy, right? There's some nuance involved where there is some outwitting going on of who can be smarter than the other team. When it turns into launch angle, exit velo, like, there's one strategy. How hard can you hit it and how far can it go? And so with that, it kind of flattens the playing experience or the viewing experience for the fan. And so you're mentioning how to like better market baseball. I think it would be interesting to bring in guys that have played and that understand some of the nuances, and especially if they're a little more versed in the analytics as well, to bring all that into context, right? So like, this guy's showing an above average spin rate. What does that actually feel like when you're sitting in the box? And so I think like giving that type of color commentary to like bring into context some of the real heavy analytics that's being used and thrown around, just to kind of bring it to life for the fans that enjoy that pureness of the game. So to understand that when a guy is spinning it hard and it's a true spin angle, you're in the box and it feels like it's rising. So you got to push the strike zone down. It starts at your ankles, then you're geared up to swing. Otherwise, it's at your neck. So I think some of that sort of commentary could make it all make sense and tie both worlds together, where you have people that enjoy the analytics and people that enjoy just the pureness
like
of
half and
grinding
half, yeah. Basically, do half and half. I like that idea better. I'm not saying fully get rid of it, but at least do half and half. And I just don't think there's a team right now that's doing that. It's mainly, to me, just analytics. I can't think of a team right now out there that does that.
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised if you saw some of the stuff behind the scenes of how they're incorporating some of the analytics. Building out some VR capabilities to where, based on what the spit outs from all the computers say, you can put on goggles and you can watch scouting reports of guys live and what's their pitch actually going to do, what's it going to feel like in the box. And so that kind of blends the two approaches together, in my mind.
So now I got to ask you, the unwritten rules of baseball, okay? What are they? And personally, do you think they're just flat out stupid, the unwritten rules of baseball?
Some of them are dumb, but like that's part of the beauty of any sort of tradition, right? So the first thing that comes to mind is like stealing signs, right? That's been pretty hot topic the last couple years with some of the scandals with the Astros, and everyone's trying to steal a sign, but you can't. That's the unwritten rule, right? So I think some of that kind of stuff helps put it in perspective to where you can't really get mad if someone's trying to steal signs, but when you're setting up cameras and being very blatant and obvious about how you're relaying signs, that's when you've broken that unwritten rule, right? Like respecting. So some of them are necessary, or else you can go too far. And then some of them are probably not as necessary, right? Like I played on some organizations that were really strict about you had to shave and wear your pants a certain way, and those rules that aren't written down in a baseball handbook probably don't make a difference, right? Some of the pimping homers and showing guys up, that kind of goes back to just respecting the game, right? Respecting the competitor. I think as long as you kind of keep those distinctions of whatever you do, as long as it honors the game of baseball, then I think it's probably the game. So I think that unless you have some other unwritten rules kind of in mind, what you're thinking of.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. Do you like that when players do that? I mean, a lot of people are saying now they don't mind if players do that because that's what baseball actually needs. Like celebrating when after hitting a home run or something. A lot of people are saying that's what baseball needs. Do you agree, or is that, as you said, not respecting the game?
Yeah, I think it matters how it's done, right? Like I was a very head down kind of player. I'm gonna do the job and I'm gonna do it hard, and you're never gonna hear me talk about it or show. Just look at the results on the field and then I move on. So I wish I had a little more of that. I wish I would have soaked it all in. If you hit a big homer late in the game, that you kind of watch it fly a little bit before you start running. But when it comes to the point of like chucking the bat and like pointing at guys or not moving until it lands, like that's too much because then that shows up the other play. But I think just appreciating the game and kind of marking that this was a special occasion, right? Like hitting a grand slam in the eighth to go up by 2, that probably shouldn't be done, and then just you run straight back to the dugout, right? So I think there is a line of where it depends. And so, yeah, I do think in certain contexts it is good for the game because, like I said, it makes it a little more exciting, but not to the point where it becomes about, look at me, I'm the best player on the field. I think that's when you go too far.
Now, the other unwritten rule I was thinking of that happens a lot, the pitchers throwing at hitters for that main thing, like we just talked about, celebrating. Do you think that needs to go away from the game?
So you got to remember, I'm a hitter, so of course that needs to go away from the game, right? Like I don't need 98 flying by my neck, and that's a situation that could really get guys hurt. And so my answer, and obviously this is very much a hitter's answer, is if you don't like it as a pitcher, pitch better, right? Don't give up the homer. So
agreed.
Yeah, that's a very old school mentality. But yeah, I mean, I don't like when guys get thrown at because I feel like it's unnecessary. There are times when you need to stand up for your teammates, and I 100% get that. But when it comes at the risk of hurting other guys or give up a homer and then now you have a guy on first again following that, like that doesn't help the team either. So I think there are certain ways to do it where you can stand up for your teammates without putting guys at risk of injury.
Growing up before you played, what would you say was the moment that got you to want to play baseball? What was there a specific game? What was it that got you wanting to play baseball?
Yeah, so my grandparents were huge Braves fans. And this is back in the early '90s when they had the big three with Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz, and they would watch it every weekend. So I remember going over there on Sundays, watching the game with them, getting excited. I don't know what I'm yelling at. I'm like 4 or 5 years old, but like everyone else is excited. And then they got me a T-ball set, and I can remember going out in the backyard with them, and it's like a little plastic bat, plastic ball. And you see everybody wearing batting gloves on TV, so I wanted some batting gloves. And the closest thing I could find is my grandma's gardening gloves. So I remember going out there and putting on her gardening gloves and trying to hit homers over the shrubs with my little T-ball set. And so I think coming from a family that really got into it and was passionate about enjoying it, and just kind of let me explore that, I think obviously is what helped me get set on that path to playing.
But was there a specific moment, like when you watched a game, was there a specific moment that you remember most that was like, hey, I got to play this? Even though, yeah, you grew up in a family that was watching it, but was there a specific moment you remember watching?
Not one that inspired me to play. I remember watching when the Braves lost in the 1995 World Series, or they won in '95. They lose like the year before, whatever it was. I was pretty young. And I remember I was devastated, absolutely devastated. I'm like, you're 6 years old. Like, what are you doing, Todd? It's not that big a deal. But yeah, so I mean, I remember some pretty vivid moments, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily an inspiring one, right? So yeah, I'm not sure there was one moment that did it for me.
So yeah, watching it that day, because what got me into it, especially being a Padres fan, was Tony Gwynn. Did you ever have like a coach that was like a Tony Gwynn that actually helped you mechanicalize, even though you probably knew how to already hit from Little League and up? Was there a certain coach that helped you more?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I had lots of coaches that poured into me throughout my time playing, but I mean, probably the biggest name that Braves fans would recognize is Terry Pendleton, who was with Atlanta for my duration there, and he wasn't as much of an offensive coach at the time, so he helped me a lot with defense. I was spent some time learning the infield, and he could pick it a little bit, so he helped me out there, which was fun. And work ethic is one thing that I saw from him too. He was in the weight room literally every day, just getting after it. And just seeing guys and how they carry themselves that really had a really good career, that rubs off on you, right? So like when you're around it, it kind of lifts you up. So he's the guy that jumps to mind of like really kind of walking the walk to go along with the talk.
Any advice that you would give whoever watching this to kids growing up to play in the field? Like you said, you were an outfielder, and being a bench player, being cold off the bench to hit. Can you give them any advice?
Yeah, as far as like the defensive side, I think the biggest intangible is just taking pride in it, right? Like it's not as sexy as hitting the homers, but you sure can make a big difference for your teammates by being a good defender. And so wanting to be a good defender is something that's really hard to teach. I definitely saw that when I was coaching, saw it when I was playing. The guys that were good defensively are the guys that wanted to be good. As far as being a good bench player, I think it's really important to just understand who you are as a player and figuring out a way to help the team. Right? Like if I would have rolled into the clubhouse trying to pretend to be a superstar, probably wouldn't have worked. Right? I was not that caliber of player to be able to walk in there and act that way. So I think what really helped my career was understanding that I can help this club, but it has to look a certain way based on my skill set and based on what the team needs. And so I think any young player really feeling out and understanding what kind of player you are, what are your gaps or deficits, and how you can improve those. I think that's really important to be successful in the long term.
And my final question to you before we let you go. I know it's early, and I know you haven't watched much, but who do you think will be in the World Series and who will win it this year?
Yeah, I don't have a very educated guess for this, right? Like you can look at historicals, but I think I'm just going to say whoever I still know on the team. I'm rooting for the player, not the team at this point.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I hope one of my buddies that I played with is in the World Series more than I hope that a team is in the World Series.
And who would that be?
Yeah, so I mean the first ones that come to mind is Simmons, is one of my good buddies. David Hale still kicking it up there in the big leagues. Phil Gosselin's getting some time up there. So I hope one of them that came through that original Atlanta crew finds their way to the World Series this year.
There you go. That's fair enough to say. I mean, Gosselin, I think, won it last year. I think he's with the Dodgers, correct? I think.
Yeah, he wasn't there last year. He's kind of bounced around a little bit. So there have been some guys that have had some playoff opportunities, though. It's exciting to watch.
Yeah, David Hale was another one. He's been with the Yankees. Yeah. Now I think he's with the Phillies, I think. Yeah, so he's had some playoffs. And Simmons, he's definitely been in the playoffs for sure. Yeah. Last year. He made it, to the NLCS, I think? Yeah, against the Dodgers? Yeah. So they're close. Yeah. They're close. It's just getting over that plateau that we know as the Dodgers, who love to spend.
Yeah, that makes it harder for sure.
Well, the Padres can be said. My team can be said the same thing. We spent so much money on free agents, and we've traded for Darvish and Snell, who are also big names, who are also money grabbers too, big time contracts. So I mean, it's going to be fun. It's going to be tough this year. I can tell you that right now. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I love watching playoff baseball, so I'll be tuning in for sure.
Definitely. But it was a fun time. I'm glad you had time to come on. I'd love to have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, man.
I got you on LinkedIn, so we'll stay in touch. I respect the fact that you don't give out your number, so I'm not going to ask you that. I'll just contact you on LinkedIn.
You got LinkedIn, you got my email,
Exactly.
so you can get in touch.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but my last thing to you before I head off, if you don't mind, I'd love for you to share this episode on your social media platforms. That would help out a lot for more views as well. And if you know anybody else, bring them my way. Have them hit me up on Twitter. That how I got you and LinkedIn, whatever, you know. Always looking for more interviews, so I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you having me on, Byron. I enjoyed it, man. It's been a while since I've got to talk baseball.
Definitely. And I'm glad that you took time out of your busy schedule too, because I know how it is. Wife and kids, I know how it is, so I appreciate it. But all right, you have a good night, and you and your family stay safe.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Have a good night.
See you, man.
Bye.